Corruption is a rust that eats the state's sovereignty from within, and Ukraine is committed to anti-corruption and international aid accountability. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane on UATV English, bringing the hard truth in easy terms directly from Ukraine. We're fighting corruption because there is no other way. Otherwise, it wins. Corruption is no less evil than corruption. Oh, sorry for that, Russia. Ukraine is steadfast in commitment to combating corruption and increasing transparency, as well as to international aid, oversight and accountability. We know the Kremlin's agenda. Spreading allegations of inherent corruption in Ukraine is normal and natural and is an expected part of the Kremlin strategy to undermine international support and aid for Ukraine. I mean, look who's talking now. A country which wealth belongs to 1% of oligarchs. The country that sends weapons to Hamas and welcomes terrorists in the Kremlin. The country whose Tsar has simply amended a country's constitution so his usurped throne won't rub his outdated butt. Unless you did not notice, no country is immune to or free of corruption, and Ukraine is no exception. We are working on it. However, talking about international aid, do you know why there is no evidence of misuse of any sort? Because there is no misuse.
I can say that not one piece of equipment has been diverted in a way that it hasn't been intended to be used. Not one piece of humanitarian aid or any other direct budget support or other types of assistance. We need to keep watching this like a hawk, and we need to keep working closely. But the Ukrainians have been incredibly open with all of the security and other types of assistance so that we could have our eyes on the ground to see what is happening. Bridget Bring, U.S. Ambassador in Ukraine, in an interview with Fox News.
Exactly. When it comes to U.S. assistance, the newly appointed U.S. Special Envoy on Ukraine's economic recovery, Penny Pritzker, totally controls the use of U.S. financial assistance. Pentagon auditors visiting Ukraine in February 2023 ensured the accountability of provided military equipment. It is all being monitored and tracked, all of it, all the time, constantly. Actually, I believe those mountains of destroyed Russian military equipment and hardware in Ukraine demonstrate it the best way possible. This is how international military equipment and aid is being used. For its intended direct purpose to fight the aggressor, to liberate Ukraine and make the world a safer place with each Russian tank burned. President Zelensky has initiated the uncompromising fight against corruption in Ukraine not because he's some kind of a superhero, but because it is actually a top priority for Ukraine, a vital survival necessity. In recent years, Ukraine has established and is exercising a fully independent anti-corruption law enforcement system with 6 state bodies devoted solely to investigating, preventing and prosecuting corruption. All state officials, and that including diplomats, are required to make every detail of their wealth available to the people by making it publicly open source. Now, that is a level of transparency exercised only by a few most developed countries around the globe. The heads of key independent anti-corruption institutions, namely the High Anti-Corruption Court, the Agency for Investigation and Asset Management, and the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, were appointed in 2023. The heads of the SAPO and NABO, these are 2 main anti-corruption services of the state of Ukraine, were chosen in a fair competition involving international experts. The world notices the efforts of President Zelensky and his team. The group of states against corruption recognized Ukraine's significant progress in preventing corruption on March 24th this very year. Ukraine's government and people continue to prioritize the fight against corruption because we all need exactly that. And Russia says, well, you know, who cares what Russia says? Let us see what Russia does. Come over to Monaco. Come over to London, French Riviera. All Russian oligarchs' offsprings are right there. Ask them about corruption. Ask them why. Ask them why they are there in Monaco's and London's and Vienna's and not in Russian army. If it is fighting for a righteous cause, as their parents dare to say in the United Nations, ask them why everything is a weapon for their downfalling motherland, and why a twisted Russian national idea is turning itself into a killing machine, weaponizing every opportunity and ignoring all of the morality. Ask them anything you like, they won't answer. Well, there is not much you can say when you know your family is a bunch of liars and murderers, and corruption is a Russian middle name. Despite the exhausting defense against Russian aggression, Ukraine is consistently walking the path towards successful transformation. We have completely fulfilled all 7 recommendations, conditions of EU accession negotiations. On November 2nd, a conference of EU foreign ministers called a larger, stronger union, making the European Union fit for enlargement and future members fit for accession, was held in Berlin. And it very much looks like as much as Ukraine needs Europe, it works the other way around just as well. Brussels needs Ukraine's capacity to strengthen the community. By granting Ukraine the candidate status last year, the EU made it clear that our country would join the European family very soon. Ukraine expects to start accession negotiations by the end of 2023. Kyiv closely monitors and also participates in discussions on further EU reforms. The processes of internal transformation on the European community should not slow down Ukraine's path to membership. Expansion at the expense of Ukraine is an opportunity for the EU to become stronger. Ukraine's accession is in no way a burden for the European community. On the contrary, we in Ukraine make sure it comes with benefits. All that and more was discussed during a conference of EU foreign ministers in Berlin with participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba.
I will raise with my fellow colleagues the point that among many policies that the European Union is implementing, we need a new, strong, consolidated EU policy on cooperation of defense industries of EU countries and candidate countries, because we see that in order to defend itself, in order to resolve conflicts and deter aggressions in Europe, efforts in the area of defense industry need to be stepped up.
Mr. Kuleba also stressed, and I could not agree more to what he said, the EU citizens themselves would be the first to benefit from the enlargement, as it would mean strengthening the capabilities of the common market, human rights and the rule of law, and make the EU a stronger player on all arenas, political, military, economical. We know how to strengthen food security, contribute to the implementation of the European Grain Deal, improve digital governance, cybersecurity, and fight hybrid threats, among other things. We are doing it every day in a state of war, and we do it successfully. And that means something. And these were not just words. Ukrainians are the biggest Euro-optimists in Europe for a reason. They defend their country and spill their blood right now as you are watching this, because we believe in our Ukrainian European future. Believe it or not, only believers change the world to better. Ukraine is preparing for a new winter season, and so does Russia. Russia will continue its missile terror against Ukraine's civilian population and critical infrastructure. Russia wants to freeze the entire country to death. Nothing new and not happening. Even these hard days, Ukraine is assisting African and Asian countries, sending them grain. While Russia does its Russian deeds, it blackmails the world with global hunger and exacerbates the food crisis and says it is ready to go nuclear. Why? Because Russia is a neo-colonial imperial predator disguised as an anti-colonialist with a long-established and recognizable pattern of spreading instability, promoting coups, fueling civil wars by sending Russian mercenaries in order to illegally extract resources while blaming the West for all that, of course. These days, Russia attempts to justify its invasion of Ukraine around the world by pouring massive resources into its 100% state-controlled so-called media. These are no media but an aggressive propaganda machine, which spreads fabricated narratives and massive disinformation campaigns, endangering also Asian, African and South American countries as well as global stability. And this is exactly why Russia needs war, needs terror and instability in the world, so that Tsar can appear on TV and say, look, all that is Western way of living. And then he sits back in his Mercedes-Benz and sends another couple of $1 billion to his Switzerland bank. And Russia is okay with that, because now they finally have an enemy to blame in own incapabilities and losing control now.
A report on the work of our maritime export corridor. I am grateful to all who are fighting and working to ensure Ukraine's access to the global market. The results are good. Russia is gradually losing control of the Black Sea and retreating to the eastern part of the waters. We will reach them there as well.
Now, let me say something personal now. It's about sports. Russian sports. You hear that? That sound. This is keep politics out of sports. Keep politics out of sports is a Russian mantra. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but invading Ukraine during the Olympic Games in 2022, Russia has flagrantly violated all international norms as well as the Olympic truce just as well. Russian athletes are talking Kremlin heads who will do anything it says their propaganda. They are closely linked to Russian military and should never be portrayed as any sort of victims of sanctions. Sports or war, Russia does all the same. It fights wars without following any even more or less humane rules. Even thought it pretends to be a knight in a shining armor that fights for justice to get other countries to support its war of aggression against Ukraine. We urge all countries to stand united in order to deny Russia the opportunity to undermine peace and stability in Asia, Africa, and South America. And to do that, just open your eyes and stop listening to what Russia says and finally start looking at what it does. Now, time for more on UATV English. The question of the day by Fahrenheit 1100 again. The question is there any one challenger in Russia that can be successful in the coming election against Putin? Elections, you say. Against Putin, you say. In Russia, you say. Well, say no more. USSR had elections, remember? Did it help it survive? All right, let us speculate. Like elections in Russia, like now. Navalny is in jail. Nemtsov murdered. Communist Zyuganov and the only anti-gay Milanov are political slaves. Zhirinovsky, a talented actually political actor and a sower of scum, has peacefully passed away. The hope of all pseudo-democrats, a seat warmer Dmitry Medvedev, who now tweets nuclear in all senses of that terrible word, blackmailing things about nuclear war, impossible for a million reasons. Well, who else? See, we are already thinking almost like Russians, almost because Russians are actually asking these questions, adding, who else if not Putin? Like, Putin is forever, so whatever. The problem is not that there is no one else in Russia but Putin, of course. The huge problem is Russians want no one else but Putin. Yes, indeed, they want the war to be over, but half of Ukraine should be Russian for some strange reason. And that is why they deserve each other. Outdated usurper and a murderer indicted by ICC, Vladimir Putin, as a president of the Russian nation that just does not care. And political indifference, in my opinion, in the long run is nothing else but a treason. It was me, Henry Keane, breaking the hard truth in easy terms for you in our weekly wrap-up this sunny Sunday in Kyiv. Please do not hesitate to like, comment and subscribe. Let us know what you think. We care for your opinion. Ask us a question, and next time in our weekly episode, I'll do my best to answer it. Stay safe and tune for more content by my dear colleagues on UATV English already tomorrow. See you very soon.